Yeah, guys, let me introduce the speaker of today's session. So, Shiv Mehta is a limited partner at MHC Digital Finance Web3 Fund and an advisor at Graviton Web3 Accelerator. He is an experienced investor who has invested in several crypto startups and teaches crypto entrepreneurship at Masters Union School of Business. Mehta worked at National Australia Bank for over 9 years and Trade5 before transitioning to Web3 and DeFi. He is a strong advocate for education in the field of Web3. Yeah, Shiv Mehta, the floor is yours. You can start your session.
Thanks a lot. I'll probably share my screen.
Yeah, I'll start.
So we've got 4 attendees over here. I think they all are lucky. It's a very limited audience, which is good. All right, so I'll share my screen. Everybody see my screen and then just give me a thumbs up, the virtual thumbs up, or just tell me. So look, limited audience means good for you guys, because that means more Q&A time and you can ask me more questions. I can go through this in a breeze then, but feel free to interrupt. Actually, I'll go through all the slides and then a Q&A round at the end would be great. So thank you very much, Suruthi, for introducing me, and Bhavya for inviting me to do a session on the fundraising for the Web3 for a Web3 founder. I'll still give a brief introduction for myself, just quickly. So I'm an author of a book called Protocols of Money, and it's a book that I had written while I was in university. I was doing my MBA at NYU Stern School of Business, and I'm from the class of 2020. Class of 2020 meant that I was stuck in my East Village apartment while I was studying because it was the first wave of pandemic, and New York City was the epicenter. And I had nothing better to do while I was stuck for 4 months when the city was locked down. So I did a lot of research as part of my MBA, and that eventually got written into a book and got published. Thanks for the support that I got from the NYU student community. And the book is called Protocols of Money. It's a primer on the history and evolution of money. My background before I got into venture capital and academia was in traditional financial services. I'm an Indian Australian. I worked for 9 years, including 2.5 years in National Australia Bank, which is the second largest bank in Australia. After I completed my MBA at NYU Stern, I came back to Sydney, which is my hometown, and I continued working. But since I became a published author, I used to get invitation, for public speaking events, and people used to pick my brain, get free tips on what crypto to buy, I guess. And then venture capital started becoming popular in the Australasian region when it comes to Web3. And eventually I became a limited partner at a Web3 venture capital fund based out of Sydney. The association started around about December 2021. And we started doing due diligence on Web3 startups and started investing in it. So some of the investments that we've done, they're multifold. We've invested in, DAOs, such as the Quest DAO. We've invested in metaverse marketplaces, MetaZone. We've invested in actual metaverse project based out of Melbourne as well, called Mehta. A lot of gaming projects like Ignite tournaments, Ethereum, and a non-token based enterprise blockchain software called DigiBuild as well, where Y Combinator and Harvard University are our co-investors. I've also invested in non-blockchain companies as well. Invested in an AI company before ChatGPT made it cool called Rainy AI, based out of Sydney. And for the last few months, I've been in India, wanted to explore opportunities in India, and invested in an edtech company called LearnApp as well. So I've got a pretty diverse startup investing background, mostly focused in crypto. But I've also diversified into AI and edtech companies as well. This lecture is about fundraising for Web3 founders, and I believe you all are attending this lecture because you are interested to start something in Web3, or have already started something in Web3 and are now looking to, raise money for your startup. The good thing about Web3 is that you have a lot of opportunities, but those avenues are useless if you don't get your basics right. So you need to get your basics right. And some of the basics are transferable if you have got experience with a Web2 startup, and some of them are unique when it comes to a Web3 startup. So I'll go through all of that. But to get the basics right, you firstly need to start with your fundraising goals. And that is something that only you can decide what your fundraising goal needs to be. So for example, if you're building a new blockchain altogether that competes with Solana blockchain, obviously your fundraising goal would be to raise as much capital as required. Sorry, my voice was echoing. Now it's better. Cool. So for that particular project, you would be raising anywhere in between $10 million to $50 to $150 million. I've seen companies, I've seen projects raising $150 million in pre-seed round because they're creating a new blockchain or a layer 2 blockchain where the settlement happens on the Bitcoin blockchain. So fundraising goals is something that you can only decide if you're raising to create a Web3 game, then depending on the Web3 game sophistication, anywhere between $3 million to $5 million would be a good starting point. So the fundraising goal, something that you need to decide. The best way to do it is by thinking from a VC perspective on how we value projects. Valuing projects is easier when you've got revenue coming in, but I believe most of the audience over here that will be attending this lecture have got a pre-revenue startup, or it's just in an ideation phase, in which case you'll be raising money for a pre-seed round. And I'll go through that later. But just for the basics, if you're raising something for a pre-seed round, you essentially need to demonstrate to investors like me or professional venture capitalists, based out of Silicon Valley, like A16Z and so forth, or any investor for that matter. You basically need to demonstrate that how would you achieve product market fit? Those three are the golden words for any startup investor. They want to see you already having achieved product market fit, in which case you're a mature startup, or you need to demonstrate how you're going to achieve product market fit if you're currently in an ideation stage, or you've just built an MVP. So in order to persuade investors that there's a market of customers who are willing to spend money, or who are willing to use your decentralized application or your blockchain, you need to demonstrate the qualitative aspect, in which case it would be your pedigree of your team, the leadership, your mission, your value statement. But something that attracts VCs most, without which, if you're not able to demonstrate that, no matter how strong your team is, if you're not able to put it a pen on paper, then your ability to actually execute the idea gets questioned. So the way to demonstrate that, in addition to your team skill set, is also by quantifying the level of market appetite. So things like the total addressable market for the idea that you have and the available market. What's the growth of that? We, as startup investors, we don't want to invest in a market that doesn't have any growth potential. Because if that would have been the case, we would have invested in oil companies. But we don't invest in oil companies because it's a matured industry. We're not going to get a moonshot opportunity if we invest in oil production companies. So you need to demonstrate that the market that you're entering has got exceptional growth opportunity. The startup idea that you've got has got a clear value proposition. You can pivot later on, but when you're raising money, you've got very strong conviction that you're going to execute on this idea, and it's going to make us as investors money and you as well. So a clear value proposition during the ideation stage is very important, even though you can pivot later on after understanding the market dynamics and user interest. You need to show how much market share capture you can take, and don't say you're going to be a monopoly, or don't say that you don't have any competition. We see a lot of, as an angel investor and a limited partner, we see a lot of pitch decks from from startup founders, especially in the pre-seed round phase. And the common mistake that they all do is thinking that they don't have any competition. When somebody tells me that they don't have any competition, it just showcases they haven't done that much of research. To give you an example, Howard Reed's the CEO of Netflix. He used to mention, before any of the streaming wars happened, and Disney Plus, and Peacock and other media companies brought their streaming platform, but Netflix was the only company in streaming. He used to say that sleep is a competition, because people who are sleeping, they're not able to watch Netflix when Netflix was the only streaming platform. So you need to broaden your horizon. You need to do more research as to where your users' attention is going, in comparison to the product that you're building. And if you have actual competition, whether domestically, when it comes to Web3, everything is international anyway, you need to put it out there, and you need to benchmark your idea towards them. And you need to showcase what your competitor's valuation is as well, because that will help the investors to not do that much of due diligence, because you have already done it for them. And in a way, they'll kind of thank you by giving you a check as well, because the due diligence process is short, and you'll get the funding earlier. So definitely do a competitor analysis and benchmark your competitor's valuation when you are setting fundraising goals for yourself. That is one of the key basic things that you need to get prepared. So see, Web3 projects, I'm not sure how familiar the audience is with Web3 startups, but the general rule of thumb with Web3 startups, especially if you're building something which is B2C rather than B2B, you can build a Web3 startup that focuses on institutional investors, that focuses on businesses that want to get onto blockchain, or you can build a Web3 startup that focuses on people like normal people. Let's say if somebody wants to play Web2 games and get rewarded in tokens, you are building a platform where I can play a Web2 game like Fortnite, and the amount of hours I'm playing on Fortnite, I get rewarded, with your startup's tokens. So in that case, you're building a retail audience-centric Web3 startup. And when you're building a Web3 startup that is focused on, the retail audience and not really the business side aspect of it, there's a lot of things that you can do and you should do before you start your pre-seed round, seed round, fundraising. And one of that is building a community. Web3 projects is all about community, which I'll showcase to you later on the differences between a Web3 startup and a Web2 startup. But start building a community. And if your idea is good, the growth of your community is going to be great. That would demonstrate to the investor that there is an interested user base, because if they are actively following your social media accounts where you are writing content about your startup, or you are documenting your building process, if people are interested, website traffic is another metric that makes the investors interested. A lot of Web3 startups have got a Discord community, so the amount of engagement, and listen carefully to what I'm saying, which is that the amount of engagement, not the amount of Discord members, the amount of engagement among the Discord community of yours, how much are they talking about, how excited they are. It could be Telegram as well. It doesn't need to be platform specific. It could be Twitter. It could be any of the social media platforms. But if you can demonstrate that your idea has you know, created some sort of user interest. That's +1 for your project, and that is +1 from an investor perspective in giving me the confidence that yes, this is a good bet to invest in. So these are some of the basics that you need to get it right. What I'll do is I'll quickly jump my screen and show you a pitch deck as well. Let me just quickly go. Can anybody tell me if they are not able to see my web browser now? Just a virtual raise of hands would do.
Yeah, we can see
Can
your
you see the pitch deck?
Yeah.
You can see the web browser. Perfect. Cool. All right, guys. So this is an example of a Web3 startup that we didn't eventually invest in, but they were successful in raising money eventually. Since it is public, I thought of sharing this rather than any of the confidential Web3 startup pitch decks that I've got in my library. But Clearverse was a Web3 startup that wanted to raise money. We did due diligence. They eventually got the funding from other investors, but their pitch deck is excellent. It's a very simple pitch deck, and I would recommend that if you are creating a pitch deck, to not overcomplicate it. So this pitch deck, you know, introducing the company, they're introducing the problem. There's no good way for signaling and discovering talent in DAOs and Web3. This is their solution. So one slide of problem, one slide of solution. This is their product that explains their MVP, what they have built so far, and their vision. This is their mission. This is their go-to-market strategy. You know, they've built an MVP. It's not like a pre-seed round. They are raising this for a seed round because they've built an MVP, and now they need money in order to do a go-to-market campaign. Some of the early users of the MVP, this is their testimonial, which is great. The team, this is their roadmap. This is the financials, which is how the money that they are raising and what are they going to use with that? What are they going to do with that money? So it's a very simple, but very effective pitch deck. When I saw this pitch deck, I was straight away interested because it was not complicated. And then the investing team were in the call with Clearverse. And following that, you know, we asked subsequent questions as to how big is the market, what your competitors are. They didn't have a competitor analysis, but nevertheless, the pitch was so simple and it was so clear what they were building, and they already had an MVP. We could, you know, go through their socials and identify whether and validate what they were saying was correct or not. That's basically it, what you need. A pitch deck, which is very simple, 10, 12 slides, you telling the story of why your startup idea is good and why I should invest. No need to complicate it with fancy technologies and so forth. So coming back, just showing you how you know, the startup fundraising looks like pre-series B rounds, typically. So you start pre-seed round is basically when you have an idea, or you know, you just have built an MVP. That's generally the pre-seed round. You don't have many users. Your monthly revenue, you're either pre-revenue or your monthly revenue is a max of $25,000. You can expect to raise between $0 to $750,000. Again, this is average. Like I said, I've seen people raising $150 million for pre-seed round, but they had the pedigree. They had like PhD. They had, you know, 10 to 15 PhDs and computer scientists who were building a blockchain, and they were ex-co-founders as well with successful exits. So it depends, but generally, if you're a first-time founder, you can expect, you know, to raise anywhere between $0 to $2 to $3 million for a Web3 startup. But on average, people get between $0 to $750,000. For example, Y Combinator gives $500,000 for startups. So generally expect anywhere between 0 to 750. Dedicated pre-seed funds, angels like myself, friends, family, founders, accelerators. In the case of Web3, there are DAOs, which I'll explain further. These are generally the avenues to raise money for your pre-seed idea. Seed round, early evidence of product market fit. Your monthly revenues in 6 digits, your round size would be bigger. And then, if you think that you need seed plus, it's just another fancy name. You can effectively make it a seed round. Series A is when you've got the validation that your startup is going places. And now you need to grow your team. That's when you do the Series A round. And that's usually a bigger round. And your monthly revenue is exceptional, above $200,000, in which case you're doing very well. Now, there is a difference, and this is where I'll be explaining the difference between a traditional startup and a Web3 startup. That's why in the previous slide, I showed you the stages of seed funding, stages of startup funding, which was from pre-seed to Series A, because generally in the Web3 startup, it's not necessarily in all cases, but generally, you don't have a round after Series A. You don't have a round after Series A in a Web3 startup because there is a token element to your Web3 startup generally. And if you got token, then majority of your investors are your community, in which case you wouldn't raise any further rounds. So a traditional startup, you continue to raise Series A, B, C, D. The raise is generally partly to increase the valuation, but as we recently noticed with Stripe, their recent venture round, their valuation got decreased by 50%. That's because they're burning cash and they're looking to reach a stage where they can do an IPO. So that's why they did a raise recently. So traditional startups, you can do multiple series until you see an exit, which could be in the form of an IPO, or it could be in the form of an acquisition by a larger company. So that's generally what you see in a traditional startup. But in a Web3 startup, you start with an idea, which could be in the pre-seed round. When you got your MVP built, you raise a seed round. Your MVP is doing well. Now you need money to really go, against your competition. You raise a Series A round. And then you have a token generation event in which majority of your tokens would be owned by community in a decentralized book building process where you buy the tokens either through an exchange or through a launchpad. And once the community owns majority of your tokens and is invested in your project, you don't necessarily see another seed round unless you get cornerstone investors and you sell them some of the team's tokens, some of the tokens that are with the team. The team sells those tokens so that they can get the liquidity in terms of dollars, which they can then use to expand operations further. But it's rare. It happens, but it's rare. Generally, after Series A, you don't see Web3 entrepreneurs doing subsequent raises. So most of the Web3 startups now, they have a company, or it could be a DAO, and that company is creating a network, and the ownership of that network is mostly with the community, which we call tokenomics. So that is something that is unique for a Web3 startup. So for example, we've invested in a company, I'm not going to name it, but it's part of my portfolio. They are an Australian operated company. We receive equity within their company, and they're building a metaverse, and we get tokens for their metaverse as well. So there is a certain percentage that we as venture capitalists, we own that company. And within that metaverse that they've created, where users can interact, just like how Sandbox or Decentraland is, and users have token and use that token as their in metaverse currency, we get tokens as well. And that is part of the venture capital portfolio. But majority of the tokens are with the community because it needs to be a decentralized network. And you can't have a decentralized network if more than 50% of the tokens are with the team or the investors, in which case they are called the insiders. So that's why a good tokenomics always have 50% or above tokens allocated to the community. And that's how Web3 startup is different to a Web2 startup where you only invest in the company and the company owns, all the products. But in this case, the company builds a network or a decentralized application, and that decentralized application is owned by a community eventually after the token generation event, which generally happens after a Series A round. One key thing, since I've mentioned and exposed you all to tokens, is that don't think of tokens as a business model. Tokens are a marketing tool. A well-designed token network. They carefully manage the distribution of the tokens. What I showed you in the previous slide was a simplified example, but you can have different stakeholders and be part of the tokenomics. So for example, if, coming back to that example that I had given you guys earlier, that if I'm building a platform where if I play Fortnite, the number of hours that I play Fortnite on it, I receive your startup ideas tokens, which I can then trade on an exchange. One of the strategic partners of the startup could be, let's say, Twitch. I'm just thinking out loud and giving you an example. There is no startup like this, but I'm just giving you an example to demonstrate a point. So if Twitch is a partner, you need to carefully allocate them certain amount of tokens during that token planning that gives them the incentive to work hard for you as well. So tokens are not really a business model through which you earn revenue as such. They are a marketing tool that ensures that all network participants, you'll create a business canvas for your startup idea, and you'll allocate, who are going to be your users, who are going to be your partners. A good tokenomics will ensure that all the network participants have got enough incentive that they'll continue to work and benefit from your project and the eventual and hopeful increase in value of your tokens. But tokens by itself is not a business model. Increase in the price of tokens is not your business model in a way that you're not going to earn money. You would earn money by selling tokens, but that shouldn't be the thought process. The thought process should be that your business model is generating fees from your platform. But it can't be that the appreciation of token price is your business model. Because if that is the case, then eventually you'll sell out all your tokens to fund the operations. So tokens are a marketing tool. They are not a business tool. Revenue tool, that's what I meant. Finally, what will a great Web3 product do? No startup, forget about a Web3 product, but no startup can be successful if it doesn't meet a fundamental human need. There are 6 needs. There are 6 types of human needs. If it doesn't fit into any of those 6 fundamental human needs, then you need to go back to the drawing board and think about iterating your product so that it fits that massive need. Other thing about crypto is that the difference between crypto startups and other startups, if you're building it on a blockchain, if you're building a decentralized application, is that blockchains are slower than traditional databases. They are slower because it's decentralized. So you need to build a product that warrants that trade-off of having slow latency compared to a traditional database. So for example, at the moment, there are a lot of entrepreneurs trying to build decentralized social media apps. And the problem at the moment that those entrepreneurs are facing is that users still, consider convenience over their privacy. It's been well documented, the privacy breaches that have happened in some of the major social networking platforms that I'm not going to name, but it's well documented out there. Nevertheless, they have millions to billions of active users on a monthly basis still. And that just showcases to you that we, as majority of the people, value convenience over their privacy. And if that's the case, then they would not use a decentralized social networking app. There are many, Lens Protocol being one. So you need to think about the unique trade-off of crypto technologies. Blockchain-enabled, applications are slower than their Web2 counterpart in most cases, and they also are not as user-friendly as Web2 because there is a wallet component involved in it, and wallets till now are not as user-friendly. They are getting there, but they are not as user-friendly. So you got to think about that part as well. The reason why I'm telling you this is because, again, I have the experience of meeting so many founders who come up and say, we're building the Uber on blockchain. You're building Uber on blockchain. People don't care. The audience so far don't care how they access Uber. All they care is that the cost of their taxi ride or the cost of their going from point A to point B is low, and it's fast. It's available anytime and it's fast. They don't want to go on a desktop, and they don't want to, create a wallet, sign a transaction. They want to do it very quickly. So a lot of people think that copying a Web2 idea and just saying that we're building this for the Web3 blockchain will get them funding. They might get funding, but they would not get funding from a sophisticated investor because there are some trade-offs for using crypto technologies. So that you need to think about, that the need that you're solving for a Web3 product, is that need so great that the user will be okay to consider your Web3 product because of the trade-off, the better experience that they're going to get on Web3. Tokens are for customer acquisition. Like I said, it's a marketing tool. So tokens enables that ownership. I don't have Uber tokens. So whether I use Uber or whether I use Lyft, I don't care. I'm not loyal. But if you've got tokens towards a project, you're more likely to use that product. Something similar that airline companies do. You're a frequent flyer member of a particular airline, you're more likely to use that airline. In addition to the benefits that their airline does, that other airline doesn't do, but that loyalty factor comes in. So that's why tokens are a marketing tool, as I suggested earlier. Enable stakeholder ownership. Again, guys, same thing as I mentioned in the previous slide. Allocate tokens to all the stakeholders in a certain allocation that it incentivizes them to build on your product or protocol and continue to work on it. And lastly, you need to operate in a transparent manner. This is true for all startups, but it's more true for a Web3 startup. And that's basically because we have a lot of bad actors in Web3 and blockchain. It's unfortunate. This whole Web3 revolution was started to democratize internet. But unfortunately, a lot of bad actors have taken over that use the funding, pretty lazy with their approach, eventually do not build a great product. So it's very important that if you raise funding and you get money, it's your responsibility, since you've taken another individual's money or another group of individuals' money, that you give them proper follow-up. You have a team of mentors and point of contacts within each investment houses through whom you've taken the money, and you operate in a very transparent manner. If you have problems, you convey it. More likely, we'll be able to solve it as being investors because we've got connections. So operate in a transparent manner. Now that we've covered the basics, how do you find a venture capitalist or an angel investor? Look, you need to do your research first. LinkedIn is a great resource. If anybody invests in startups professionally, they would be on LinkedIn, or their team members would be on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a great resource to find investors. Once you find out and create a list of potential venture capitalists and investors, it could be angel investors as well. Have a look on what kind of investments do they make. So I've invested in crypto startups. I've invested in AI and edtech startup. If for some reason, somebody is creating a startup that is not blockchain, but wants to create a CRM company, let's say they want to compete against Salesforce, I'll probably not be a potential investor for them because I've never invested in a CRM company. So if somebody wants to build a crypto startup, they'll look on LinkedIn, they look at potential VCs and angel investors. I'll probably come in that list, and you should approach me then. You should leverage your network. You are part of Women Who Code. Contact your volunteers at Women Who Code to contact your fellows at Women Who Code and ask them then, hey, you helped conduct this blockchain lecture series. You must have connections. This is a startup that I'm kind of building up. Can you help me to set up a warm introduction with some of those VCs? This is my idea. So get warm intros, establish a personal connection, build your personal brand. I was able to get into venture capital without having any background in VC investing. And that was purely because I had a personal brand and I networked. So build your personal brand. If you're an entrepreneur, building a personal brand is very important. If you're a team of 2, 3, 4 co-founders, you all don't need to do it if you don't want to do it, but at least 1 or 2 co-founders within that co-founding team, that you need to have a personal brand. Personal brand is very important nowadays. Lastly, if you're very desperate, get capital. But during the initial stages where you're looking for capital, try to shortlist investors that are going to provide strategic value to you. Because I'll be honest with you, capital has become easy, and I'll demonstrate to you why I'm saying that. But capital is easy. What you want is capital that comes with strategic value. So all the startups that I've invested in, because I've studied blockchain and digital currencies as part of my MBA at NYU Stern School of Business, I'm able to provide that strategic value because I've studied this at an academic level. So people see me and they want to not only get my capital, but they want to get my, the research that I've done on the landscape of crypto. They want that value from me as well, being part of the investment cap table of theirs. I've invested in an AI company because I've done some AI courses as part of my MBA at NYU Stern. And I've got an interest, and I kind of had a foresight that AI is coming in a way that it came in ChatGPT. And I found a startup that fit my criteria. Whether it's successful or not, that's another story, but it fit my criteria. And I was able to invest it in a personal capacity as an angel investor in it. And then when I came to India, I'm a big component of education. I like the startup that is doing something in financial education called LearnApp. I invested in that as an angel investor because in India, crypto education isn't that much. And the founder saw some value in me that I can probably teach or give some guidance on crypto education to him. So you want investors in your cap table that not only provide capital, but they also provide you with strategic value. Keep in mind that you got to be patient. If you're thinking that you're going to start this fundraising process and you get funding within 1 month, I want to give you the bad news that most likely it's not going to happen unless you are like 1 in a million. In which case, if you are, great on you, you should. But to be realistic and to give yourself a buffer, give yourself a runway of around 4 or 5 months for you to start the process of approaching investors and getting money into your bank account or in your crypto wallets. In the case of you building a Web3 startup, give yourself 4 to 5 months to complete this process of fundraising in the pre-seed round. Look, the great thing about Web3 is that it's a new technology, and if you can't find a venture capital house or angel investors, there are a lot of accelerators. You obviously know of Y Combinator and Techstars. Y Combinator and Techstars are actively investing in Web3 startups now. Most of the YC class of 2022, 2021 were Web3 startups, most of them. And the same for Techstars. In Techstars and everybody knows Y Combinator. If you are a, soon to be founder of any sort of startup, Y Combinator is the OG. And Techstars is not far behind. Techstars have invested cumulatively around $96 billion in pre-seed startups, or of value of that. So you've got Y Combinator, Techstars who have started to invest in Web3 startups, which is great for the industry and for any entrepreneur who wants to build in Web3. Then you got blockchain grants as well. And every company, every platform would have their own grants because they want you to build on their blockchain. So there's a website called blockchaingrants.org that has a comprehensive list of all organization, Web3 companies or blockchain platforms that provide grants. And these are not, I'm talking about grants that range from $25,000 to $150,000. That's good enough money to start building on your idea in a pre-seed stage. And they are grants, so that means they don't take any ownership. You still own 100% of your project and your company, and they give you, a lot of benefits. So if you're building a Web3 startup, you got blockchain grants, and the resources blockchaingrants.org. And then you've got accelerators, upcoming accelerators as well. I'm an advisor to one such accelerator called Graviton, which is based out of India. And our mission in Graviton, where I'm an advisor, is to ensure that India doesn't leave behind the Web3 race like it did in the 90s when it comes to Web 1 and Web 2. But India, now being a very strong economy, shouldn't be left behind in Web3. So we give an initial investment of $50,000, which is a lot of money in Indian rupees. And with that, we give 16 weeks of accelerated growth modules mentorship, where we as advisors actively work with the founders and fine-tune their startup idea. So you've got a lot of resources. Even if you can't find, even if you don't get good response from angel investors or professional VC outfits, you got Y Combinator, you got Techstars, you got blockchain grants, and you got accelerators that are coming up as well, that where if your idea is good, we'll fund you. And look, you should treat all this fundraising processes as an experience and a learning process. If you're not getting the money, take feedback. Anybody who's rejecting you, get the feedback from them as to why they're not giving you money, and then improve on your pitch. It's a learning process. You got to think positively from that mind frame. And look, lastly, if you do not get any grants, let's say, you do not get any accelerator to accept you, that's okay. We live in the age of democratized internet, where you've got decentralized autonomous organizations called DAOs, and we've got Web3 launchpads. Think of them as Kickstarter, so crowdfunding platform, but without the hefty 20 to 30% fees. that many of these crowdfunding platforms charge. So there is Alliance DAO, which is the accelerating the best Web3 founders. They've been instrumental in creating this concept of using the DAO to fund Web3 startups, and they are great at it. If anybody's interested, they are starting a cohort. The one that I'm associated with as an advisor to Graviton, their cohort has ended. I mean, they have stopped accepting applications, and they're India-centric anyway. But Alliance DAO is global, and they are accepting their next cohort on May 26th. So if anybody is in advanced stages or are keen to work on an idea and want to, go through this fundraising process, you got time. May 26th is when they'll start accepting the next cohort, applications for the next cohort, and that is Alliance DAO, and they're a big one. Then you've got Orange DAO, which is, you can think about people who got money from Y Combinator and eventually became successful entrepreneurs. They all banded together, hundreds of them, and created a DAO to invest in Web3 startups. Then you got Juicebox, another fundraising protocol on the blockchain. You got the Lao, you got DAO Maker, you got Polka Starter, where basically you pitch your idea, and interested retail Web3 investors can go to these platforms, look at your idea and be like, okay, I want to be part of this crowdfunding campaign. So you've got a lot of avenues. You don't have dearth of avenues to raise capital. Now, how much you want to raise, that might be something that will vary depending upon the fundraising channel. But if you want to raise $100,000 through a combination of these fundraising channels, you should be able to raise at least $100,000 for your idea. And if you're not able to raise through any of these channels, get the feedback, improve on your pitch, pivot, and repeat that cycle until you get a successful fundraise. That was it. Yeah, I just wanted to showcase you Alliance DAO. So great Web3 fundraising platform and a great community that supports entrepreneurship in the Web3 space. And finally, blockchain grants. They have a comprehensive list of all the platforms that provide fundraising, and you can get fundraising from a combination of these platforms. And the other good thing about grants is that they don't take ownership of your project, unlike if you do it through a crowdfunding platform or through DAOs or through accelerators. In the case of grants, if you're in a pre-seed stage, just an idea, it's a great tool. And the good thing about Web3 is that there are a lot of companies giving blockchain grants. So with that, I'll stop sharing and I'll be over here to take some questions if anybody's interested. I can see that some attendees have left off. I hope it's not because I was boring, but I'm open for any questions now.
Thank you, Shiv. It was really an insightful session, and I think all of us have learned a lot. Users, please drop in your question in the Q&A session so that Shiv may be able to answer this question. I guess we have one question here.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think I've probably answered the anonymous attendee question, which is how do I reach out to investor? You create a list of potential investors that might be able to help you, and then you reach out to them, send them a cold LinkedIn message. I get a lot of cold LinkedIn messages. Some of them eventually I've invested in. Send a cold LinkedIn message, leverage your network to get warm introductions, build your personal brand. Yeah, we live in the age of internet and social network, where we're probably just 2 degrees of separation from the most prolific investor in your field. So yeah, just reach out using social network and don't feel shy. The other question is by Tatiana. We've got into the Outlier Ventures program and will soon approach demo day. What's the best approach to increase investors' interest before this event? So firstly, Tatiana, congratulations on getting into Outlier Ventures. I haven't mentioned them on my deck, but Outlier Ventures they are a trailblazing organization. If you got through them, then that means you've got a good startup idea, because it's not easy to get into Outlier Ventures, and they've got great connections. So well done on it. Congratulations on that. Let me just mark this answer live. What's the best approach to increase investors' interest before this event? Look, that's a very good question that you've asked. What you do is, whomsoever are your mentors at Outlier Ventures, you just provide them update if you haven't done as such. You just provide them with a lot of update as to which stage you are in of the project, and create that hype. To increase investors' interest, you need to create that hype, be engaged with them, get to know from them who all are going to be present during the demo day. If they can give you a list of those guests, and if you can then reach out to them, say that, hey, we got to know that you're going to be attending the demo day. Would love if I can get a one-on-one session with you, even for 15 minutes. Now we don't have COVID. If those guests are going to be, staying nearby you, invite them for a coffee and just meet them, and tell them during that one-on-one that this is what I'm building. So just keen to get your idea, keen to get your feedback on how I can improve during demo day. So again, the best approach to increase investors' interest is by actually meeting them. If you get to know who they are, and if in case you do not know who they are, and you're going to be, at the demo day, going to meet them, just be very enthusiastic. Be enthusiastic, be very confident when you are during the demo day, throughout the demo day, not just during your pitch, but throughout the demo day. Do follow-ups after your pitch. Go ahead and meet the guest, or talk to the guest, or get their details and say, I would love to provide you with follow-up about our startup, and get your insights whenever you have time. So just be very engaged, be enthusiastic, and be confident. How do I explain Web3 project to the non-tech investors? I'm a developer. Yeah, look, that's a good question. And firstly, congratulations on being developer. There is a dearth of good Web3 developers out there. So you are a rare commodity. You're a rare talent. But this is a good question that you've asked, because a lot of times you wouldn't get funding if you are too technical. There are a lot of good products out there, but because they do not have good business people within their team, their products eventually do not get enough traction. So how do I explain Web3 project to non-tech investors is probably hire a business person. I know that business people are not that much in demand, but you can't be a successful startup if you do not have at least one person who's got acute business acumen. So get a business person. It doesn't need to be an MBA, but get a business person who understands copywriting. We've got ChatGPT now. So, I mean, again, we are of benefit of using the technology where they can do the copywriting for us. But it's not just copywriting. It's about community building. It's about, engagement. It's about storytelling. So, yeah, I'll highly recommend that if you are technical founder and you don't have a business co-founder, you get a business co-founder who can help you, or you get a chief operating officer. If not a founder, get a chief operating officer, give him or her some equity or some tokens in locked supply, but get them to be your co-founding partner in a way for the whole fundraising process, because it's a totally different skill set. And if you're having difficulty in it, then you definitely should hire a business person. That's the best that I can give you, a tip. because the role of that business person is not going to be limited to the fundraising process. After you get the money, you need to build a community. And if you think that you're having difficulty explaining your Web3 project to investors, then you're going to have a lot more difficulty explaining it to your eventual user audience. So hire a business person, hire a communications expert. They need to be part of the team, if not your co-founding team. Although I would highly recommend a co-founder who comes from a business background. I highly recommend that. What are your thoughts about non-dilutive fundraising? Yeah, look, I think that's good. I'm an investor. I'm not really an entrepreneur. I'm an investor, but I like to invest in projects where both the entrepreneur and the investor benefits. So from my point of view, non-dilutive fundraising is great. It's not that easy to get, but it's great. But yeah, I think it's great, non-dilutive fundraising. How do I keep my project from getting shadowed by bigger players since it's all open source? Yeah, look, that's a good question. I would tell you this, that yes, you are right that it is open source, but this is where a Web3 startup differentiates from Web2, where Web3, it's all about community. So if you build a damn good community, and that's where you need somebody from a business acumen to help you doing that, or somebody from, like a communications, a community building background. If you got a very active community, then your project, you got that network effect already in place before the launch. That other project, they might be able to shadow your tech. Although I have to say it's not very easy to shadow tech. You might think that, oh, they can just fork your GitHub repository and that's it. But you're actively developing. Even if they are able to fork your repository, they'll always be behind you. So that is one thing. But in a Web3 startup, community is your biggest asset. I know tech people might hate on me, but in a Web3 startup, community is the biggest asset. To give you an example, Cardano, I'm pretty sure if you are attending this event, you know Cardano. Cardano was launched in late 2017, I think, and it was deemed as an Ethereum killer. It's been 6 years. It's been close to 6 years. It hasn't created a single not a single application has come out from Cardano that is worth talking about. It's been 6 years. And its community still actively believes that they're going to beat Ethereum as the go-to decentralized smart contracts platform. And its tokens are still top 10 token. I mean, forget about Cardano for a second. Let's talk about Dogecoin. We can laugh about Dogecoin. We can say whatever about Dogecoin, but Dogecoin has got an impeccable community. That's one thing that you can't deny. Dogecoin is inferior in every sense of the word as a technology. But what it's got a great community. So if you're worried about your tech, your code getting shadowed by bigger players, you need to invest in community building. And if you're great, what I mean by great, if your product is great and you got one or two business professionals who are able to communicate and build that hype around it, then you've got an unbeatable community, which bigger players can't shadow. They might buy you, just like how A16Z and other venture capitalists eventually bought Yuga Labs, invested in Yuga Labs because, Bored Ape Yacht Club just went through the roof, but they wouldn't be able to shadow it. Same thing with Doodles. So community, the answer for that would be community building. I believe in potential of Dogecoin, love it. I hope you're not one of my friends who is attending this who actively tells me about Dogecoin. Is deal by deal fundraising better than having individual investor? So it's a good question again. My experience suggests that you need to get investors, again, that gives you that strategic value, that if you call them up, that I need help with this, they are able to help you. If that could be in the form of a venture capital house like A16Z, or Y Combinator, that basically opens up plethora of network for you, then yes, you would get them on board compared to an individual investor. But let's say if an individual investor can do that for you as well, for example, if you got Elon Musk somehow in your fundraise, and he'll tweet about your project like he tweets about Dogecoin, then Elon Musk is much better as an investor than some of the tier 2 venture capitalists that you might get. Because as soon as you say that you got Elon, who has invested in your project, that is social proof enough to get anybody else later on. So I think it depends. Deal by deal fundraising better than having individual investor. If you've got conviction in your project and you believe you do not need much help, you just need the money, then don't get a venture capital house, just get an individual investor. Some people, for example, although they do not invest in pre-seed phases, but let's say if you are doing a Series A round, a lot of people get Tiger Global, SoftBank, or institutional investors who have started investing in Web3 projects like Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, or other sovereign wealth funds based out of the Middle East, because Dubai is now working itself to make it the crypto capital of the world actively. So all those sovereign wealth funds and institutional investors that used to invest traditionally in equities, they are starting to invest in Web3. You approach them, they'll give you a lot of capital, and they'll probably not ask you that much questions. So it really depends. If you want an investor that doesn't ask you that much questions, but gives you the capital, individual investors, traditional late stage venture, houses, they are good. But if you want those network of connections and you want constant feedback, then active startup investors like Y Combinator, they are useful.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you, Shiv, for being with us today.